this before you. Choose wisely. Permeating, Jeff, in the world, and it appears to have an affront towards heteronormative masculinity. And we're going to use this show more or less to talk about all the different dynamics that are tied to more or less a Marxist agenda that appears to try to usurp the masculine psyche, but also we're going to talk about who you are, what brings you or more or less brought you into therapy, and why you're so excited about coming into a space in a time when men are actually looking for answers and solutions. So before we start, tell the audience who you are, what you're about, and your specialty, and we'll piggyback off one another and talk about some of the nuances of being a therapist and how, in my opinion, if you're a traditional masculine therapist, it's always through the veneer of toxic masculinity. So I'm gonna let you start, and we're gonna chop it up. Go ahead, brother.
Hey, yeah. One, thank you for welcoming me into your space and your platform.
Yes,
as stated, my name is Jeff James. The podcast is Ask a Brother Podcast. And yeah, I've been doing therapy and mental health for over a decade. I've worked in 3 major urban cities. I've been exposed to working in prison settings, schools, and now outpatient, where I am the director over the largest mental health nonprofit in the city of Philadelphia. And you know, as far as what my specializations are, trauma is my main focus. That's my I have a certification in it, and I'm a consultant for prolonged exposure. And obviously, I'm licensed as well. And my job at this point in my career now is really trying to hire and get people licensed and to really offer high quality clinical services to people within the inner city. A lot of times, I think with mental health, we always associate getting the best care in private practice and in the suburbs. My goal is to kind of really bring that in at home to really the city that I'm from and being able to replicate the same high level of care in those settings as well. So yeah, regardless of whether it's people that have experienced violence, whether it's physical violence, violence in the community, relational violence, any type of form of trauma, our goal is just to help people get their lives back on track. But I also do dabble and work with couples, individuals that struggle with depression, anxiety, masculinity issues, and just identity issues as a whole. I do have a special place in my heart for men and boys who feel like in a lot of areas in their life, including trying mental health, they don't feel like they're heard or understood. So, so for whatever reason, I guess I just decided this was the year to kind of bring what I've been seeing and observing and kind of putting it out in the forefront of the public domain and let people think and explore if maybe what I'm saying has some merit to it.
Yeah, I've been in the space, Jeff, for I don't know, I think 4 years. I think I started off in 2021, and I share a little bit about about myself. I started off in 2021 as the Kosher Clinician, and I came up with that moniker because I said emphatically that there are 7 steps to male optimization, in my opinion. And in the Hebrew, the 7 means to kavah. The kavah means to be complete. And so in my mind, I came up with 7 elemental principles that I thought would be more or less germane to the efficacy of Black men and men in general. And those 7 steps were faith, family, finances, female psychology, world travel, male mental health, male physical health, and politics. I've always said that if men can circumnavigate those 7 principles, then they become optimized. Once they become optimized, they become kosher. And so I came up with that. If it ain't 7, it ain't kosher. If it ain't kosher, it ain't right. And so, the banner that I have presented before you is called Black Unicorns and Angry Black Men. And you and I indeed are unicorns. You don't find too many Black male therapists, not only in this space, but you don't really see them in the broader society, especially when you look at academia. I would argue, Jeff, that at the higher level, it's mostly white women, then Black women, white men, maybe Latin men, and then or Asian men, and then Black men. We're like probably about 1 or 2%. What's been some of your experiences being a Black male therapist? Some of the microaggressions you've experienced, and what's been some of your struggles to conveying the necessities of men being in therapy?
Yeah. Funny enough, one of the things, because I was a part of the cultural considerations team that actually made some adaptations to the prolonged exposure model, which is an evidence-based approach. And the whole time when we were talking about recognizing diversity, recognizing cultural things that we need to factor in, we were factoring in race, we were factoring in where people were from, we were factoring in all disabilities, we were factoring in so many different things. And I just had noticed for the last 5 years or so that of all the things that we try to factor in from a cultural perspective, the one that seems to never be brought up is just the idea of being boys or men, and whether or not we need to do cultural adaptations that's specific for that group. And it seems like by default, for whatever reason in the workplace, there seems to be a really, really interesting habit amongst clinicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, et cetera, where if we're going to skew towards anything, it tends to skew heavily towards the feminine, and towards women's conversational styles, their patterns, their approaches to feeling better therapeutically. It was always typically skewed with what women in general want, as both as far as being the client or the patient, as well as as a clinician as well. So I started to notice it very, very early on. And over time, I started to realize that anytime men, as the client was coming in, if they were starting to notice these things or bringing these things up, they were kind of shut down or not really acknowledged or validated. But then on the flip side, if you worked in these spaces as an educator, as a clinician, if you worked in spaces where you pointed out things that you're noticing on the female population side, or even amongst your coworkers, it seemed to be much more of a visceral negative reaction to kind of prevent you from being able to scrutinize and hold women and females to the same standard that you hold males or boys or men.
Right. And I think that, Jeff, a lot of it is tied into a concept that I created. Well, one, it's a schema affliction, but also I think it's something called paranoid persecution. You know, my background, when I was at UNC Chapel Hill, I got certified in cognitive behavior therapy. And I got the first phase of the Gottman method in Punta Cana. I got my first cert in the Gottman method in Punta Cana more recently, back in December. And what you say really harkens to the reality of what I call the minimization of masculinity. At the training that I was at, one of the things that was key, one of the things that was evident in that conversation was the fact that the instructor that actually admitted that I was correct. Everything that was more or less assigned to male issues was more or less truncated as being bad, toxic, ignorant. And he said, yeah, because I said, I noticed, the husband was the bad guy. You made the husband seem like he was bad. He was the enemy. He was the problem. And what you see a lot of times now, I don't know if you saw it in therapy a lot of times, many women, Jeff, they don't send men to therapy or their husbands to therapy because there's really an issue with them, but it's really confirmation bias. So they'll send them to the therapist to confirm whatever pathological issues that they have assigned towards the husband to make the husband be the bad guy. And so many people, in my opinion, and I'm sure you will agree, are trained under the umbrella of wokeness and also Marxism. And because of that, it's created this current zeitgeist or what we call the spirit of this current age, where anything masculine is bad, anything feminine is good. And Jeff, I believe succinctly that it's not just something that's sociological. I think it goes even deeper into esoteric. I think it's also spiritual. And we'll talk about that at some point as we continue to speak. But what's been some of your challenges circumnavigating this toxic maze called toxic femininity, or more or less this feminist agenda that seeks to usurp or minimize male suffering, but also, in my opinion, the sovereignty of masculinity? What's been some of your struggles that you've seen?
Professionally, what I've seen is a noticeable continued decline and lack of male participation in therapy. What I've noticed is the men, not all, but many men who go to therapy, they can only do it very, very short term, or they upon 1 or 2 sessions, they're done. Like they just cannot. They realize this isn't it. This isn't what I'm looking for. This isn't going to help me. And what I was noticing was the conclusions that the clinicians who are used to what you're talking about in terms of the style and approach to how to offer therapy, their conclusions was always putting the onus on the blame on, well, men just don't like to open up. Men don't like to do this. Men don't like therapy. They never turn the microscope or the magnifying glass back on themselves to explore the possibility that it's them, it's their packaging, or it's the field itself that isn't balanced, isn't actually highlighting the needs of men. It's actually highlighting often who's the initiator of a lot of these therapeutic interventions, which usually oftentimes, if it involves a couple, happens to be the woman. So it puts therapists in a very interesting choice dilemma. If the party who tends to be the woman is the one who's initiating the therapy, right? And the guy kind of is half in, half out, not really sure if this is going to work or if he wants it. The therapist is going to get paid listening to one of these people. Right. So the therapist seeking to focus and validate more of the needs and concerns of the party who's not really wanting therapy could end up resulting in the person who wanted the therapy in the first place feeling like they're not listening to me. We came in to fix him. And a lot of therapists who aren't really aware of what I'm kind of bringing up and discussing, if the untrained, unskilled, unexperienced therapists will end up picking a side instead of maintaining objectivity and balance.
Yes.
And with the end result being that a lot of men feel like if all that's going to happen is I'm going to feel the same thing I'm experiencing at home, and now I'm going to get double teamed in an office, in a counselor's office, why would I even put myself through this? So
I totally agree.
Yeah. So I've
totally agree.
definitely noticed that, man. And then number two, even in workplaces, just in general, it seems more often than not that a lot of men are feeling stifled. They feel like they can't actually be themselves. They can't even point out issues, that double standards of things that they're noticing in the workplace. It's not unusual for women to make comments about hair, nails, clothes, different articles of clothing that people have. Working around a lot of women, I see sometimes how they interact with each other in terms of raising their voice, getting an attitude, getting snippy with their superiors. These are things that, unfortunately, I don't say unfortunately, just in general, many of the things that are allowed or given grace for, it's seen and pathologized when a man does or says the same exact thing.
I totally agree. Yes, sir.
Those are some of the anecdotal things that I've kind of observed, and most men, a lot of men seem to confirm it as well.
Yeah. And I agree with you 100%, man. And this pathological way of thinking, it makes it very difficult for men. And one of the things I tell men, Jeff, is that sometimes they're the arbiters of their own pain. In behavior modification, you can't have what's called positive reinforcement, where you're more or less, or negative reinforcement, positive reinforcement. And I know there needs to be what's called negative homeostasis instead of positive homeostasis in family systems. And a lot of times what happens with a lot of men, they compromise their power because they assume, Jeff, that if they do what the wife say, then they're going to get their needs met. But what I've seen and known in my lifetime, being married for 29 years, but also understanding the nature of women, is that women only respect power and strength. That's all they respect. And when you don't stand on masculine principles, when you don't stand on business, when you're constantly tap dancing and trying to bojangle and whatever, women don't respect that. You be very clear. You be very calm. You be very concise. You say what you mean what you say. And either she's down or she's not down, and you just walk away. But so many men compromise their power, Jeff, because they don't know how much power that they really have. Harriet Tubman was very powerful in her pronouncements, where she said that I could have freed a lot more if they did not already know that they were slaves. But not only that, Frederick Douglass said that power never conceded to anything without a struggle. It never have, and it never will. And so there's a power dynamic, Jeff, that's permeating in the minds of a lot of men, where they have not necessarily seen men like yourself and I that are more or less exemplars of masculinity, but not only exemplars of masculinity, men that are trying to let men know that not only do they have power, but they don't have to be subjugated to the emotional whims of the women that they're dealing with. And so therefore, I blame some of the men for some of the pain that they talk about. You can't be the arbiter of your own pain and continue to complain about it. I've seen it many times in couples therapy. There was a gentleman that I was trying to help. And I pointed out his rationalization, which was ego defense mechanisms. And he knew what I was saying was correct, but he felt bad. But instead of fighting the power, fighting through the modern zeitgeist that we have, he didn't fight it. he told me, I decided to forego my last therapy sessions. And, Jeff, you from Philly, I'm from North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things people do, I was trying to take him, Jeff, to Man University, but he wanted to go to SimU. So I would say, he was going to SimU, Jeff. I was trying to take him to Man U. And he said, after careful consideration, I decided to forego my last therapeutic sessions and go to SimU. So they always go back to SimU because they are slaves to the emotional whims of a woman. I've listened to some of the things, Jeff, you said a couple of times on your podcast. I've listened to you a couple of podcasts, some of the things you said. And I know you were married at one point in the past. What did you learn about your marriage from the past that you brought into the new relationship that would not sabotage you as a masculine man?
Exactly what you said. Number one, establishing early on what you will and won't do, what you will and won't accept, and actually sticking to it. I think a lot of what we're experiencing now is actually the result of what you said about men constantly compromising and orbiting their identity, their role, and their behavior around their women's feelings. And that being the most central important thing in the confines of a relationship. And that's very problematic. Number one, if the most central important factor that's guiding your life, your principles, and the way you move is not the oath, it's not the loyalty, it's not the commitment, it's not the marriage itself, it's your wife or girlfriend's feelings. You can see how that could be extremely problematic. One, feelings don't stay the same. They're not constant. And number two, as you stated earlier, you cannot actually satisfy them long term. They will always feel like a very short-term gratification experience. And an example I gave, and I actually raised it recently with a client of mine, where I asked her what's one of her hobbies, and she mentioned that she really, really loves bags, custom bags and luxury bags. And I said to her, describe to me what was your first bag when you first got that first luxury bag, when you first were able to afford it, like what was it like? And she just described, like, she went back in time and she just said like how amazed she was and how happy she was. She just was taking it with her everywhere. And I said, so you've been collecting bags now for about 20 years? And she said, yeah. And I said, even though you still do it now, do you notice that you don't feel the same exact way you felt that first time? And yet you know, although you still do it now, do you notice that like you don't have the same reaction, you don't have the same emotional reaction response, your dopamine triggers, nothing's feeling quite the same as that first time.
Right.
And what I'm arguing is that when you take that concept and apply it to relationships, a lot of times when women say like they'll describe things in terms of what their male counterpart is or isn't doing, and I would argue sometimes that even if he is doing it, you get used to it. It doesn't affect you emotionally the same way. And now you're not only feeling like, well, now we now have to add something new to get that same feeling. Right. But now they're also comparing what they are and aren't experiencing in their regular relationships. They're comparing it to their girlfriends and what they're seeing on social media. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the end result is you've now trapped your male counterpart into a vicious cycle where he's placed you on a pedestal and he's looking up at you and you're looking down at him. Right. One is the adored and one's the adorer. And it turns out that for a lot of women, they actually aren't satisfied and actually aren't happy being on a pedestal because a lot of them want to be in a relationship with the man that they look up to and can be led by.
Right.
Not the man who is constantly trying to chase behind them to keep them happy. So they created the paradigm that they unfortunately aren't actually happy with. Mm-hmm. And now that's when they start speaking and talking and stating how they've settled and they could do better, and their friends are encouraging them to move on. And before you know it, they're looking for all the various forms of confirmation bias to justify why it is that they can see him as primarily being the issue, him being the problem, and that if in the end, regardless of the commitment and promises that they made, they can leave and they'll be justified because in the end, my worldview, my confirmation bias, and everybody around me on social media and in person is basically saying if there's an issue in this relationship, ultimately he's at fault. And the most central important thing is not the kids, it's not the marriage or my oath for commitment. It is my happiness.
It's your happiness, right? Right. And being